In 1281, a vast invasion fleet appeared beside Japan. Thousands of ships carried warriors from across Kublai's empire. Japan had no navy powerful enough to meet them at sea. On land, defenders faced an empire that had crushed kingdoms. For weeks, invaders waited offshore as the weather changed. Then the sky blackened and Kublai's fleet began disappearing. This was not the Mongols' first attempt to conquer Japan. 7 years earlier, another invasion had reached these shores. Japan survived both attacks, but not through one miracle. The real story begins with determined samurai resistance and coastal defenses. It ends with Mongol mistakes and violent storms at sea. To understand the fleet, we must begin with Kublai Khan. He was Genghis Khan's grandson and ruler of the Yuan Dynasty. By the late 13th century, Mongol power spanned Eurasia. Cities across Eurasia had learned to fear Mongol armies. Kublai wanted Japan to recognize his authority and submit. He sent letters demanding submission from Japan's leaders. The letters were formal, but their threat was unmistakable. Japan's leaders refused to accept a foreign ruler. To Kublai, resistance became an insult and strategic problem. Korean shipyards, sailors, and soldiers became essential for invasion. The Mongols mastered horses, mobility, intelligence, and coordinated land warfare. Those strengths had conquered kingdoms across Eurasia. Crossing dangerous water required ships, skilled crews, weather, and timing. In 1274, Kublai launched his first invasion toward northern Kyushu. The fleet crossed from Korea and struck Tsushima before reaching Iki Island. Local defenders fought fiercely, but they were overwhelmed by larger organized forces. From there, the invaders moved toward Hakata Bay on Kyushu. The Japanese warriors waiting there fought in a very different military tradition. Samurai valued individual courage, family reputation, and personal acts of bravery. The invaders fought in coordinated formations with massed arrow volleys. They also used explosive weapons that terrified Japanese defenders. Japanese accounts describe unfamiliar projectiles that burst with terrifying noise and smoke. The Mongols also used shields and disciplined volleys to protect advancing troops. At first, these tactics shocked samurai, accustomed to different forms of combat. Yet the Japanese did not collapse when their battlefield customs failed. They regrouped, attacked repeatedly, and forced the invaders into difficult fighting. By evening, the invading commanders faced casualties, fatigue, and uncertain supplies. They withdrew many troops back toward their ships for the night. Then rough weather struck the fleet gathered near the Japanese coast. Some vessels were damaged or destroyed, while others escaped toward Korea. Japanese resistance had already made the campaign dangerous. Then worsening weather made retreat even more difficult. The first invasion ended, but everyone understood that Kublai might return. Japan's military government did not simply wait and pray for another storm. Officials organized warriors and watched the vulnerable coastline. They strengthened the places where enemy troops might land. Along Hakata Bay, workers built a long defensive stone barrier. The wall made it harder for troops and horses to land quickly. It also denied the invaders easy access to open ground beyond the beach. Samurai were ordered to remain prepared for years after the first attack. Defenders expected rewards for their costly military service. But the shogunate had little new wealth to distribute. Meanwhile, Kublai Khan prepared a second invasion on a far greater scale. That victory gave Kublai access to more ships, ports, sailors, and soldiers. The second invasion force was divided into two major fleets. An eastern force sailed from Korea toward the familiar route to Kyushu. A much larger southern force was assembled from former Song territories. Modern historians debate those totals, but the operation was unquestionably massive. Coordinating two fleets across long distances created serious dangers. One delay could disrupt the entire invasion plan. The Eastern Fleet arrived first in 1281 and approached Hakata Bay. This time, the Japanese defenders were waiting behind prepared coastal positions. The stone wall prevented the invaders from repeating their earlier landing easily. Fighting spread across beaches, nearby islands, and the waters beyond the defenses. Japanese warriors launched small boats at night against the anchored fleet. They boarded enemy vessels, attacked crews, and withdrew before larger forces reacted. But they denied the invaders rest and kept constant pressure on the ships. The Mongol-led forces attempted landings at several points around northern Kyushu. Japanese resistance repeatedly prevented them from securing a stable beachhead. Ships remained crowded with soldiers, animals, weapons, and food. Fresh drinking water became increasingly difficult to protect. Summer heat and disease made those floating camps increasingly dangerous. Commanders also waited for the Southern Fleet, which had sailed later. When the two forces finally gathered, their coordination remained difficult. Many soldiers were Chinese or Korean subjects fighting under Yuan authority. It was a huge multinational expedition operating far from secure bases. Some vessels were designed for rivers or coastal travel, not violent seas. The fleet eventually gathered around islands west of Hakata Bay. Yet they had lost time, surprise, and freedom of movement. The Japanese wall held, while samurai attacks continued along the coast. Then, in August of 1281, the weather began to turn against the fleet. A powerful typhoon moved through the region with destructive winds and waves. Ships smashed together as their anchors failed. Other vessels struck rocks or broke apart in shallow water. Heavy vessels became traps as soldiers struggled below collapsing decks. Men who reached the water faced waves, debris, darkness, and enemy shores. Some crews tried to escape, while others crowded onto surviving ships. By morning, wreckage covered the sea around the shattered invasion force. However, the disaster clearly ended Kublai Khan's second invasion of Japan. Japanese forces attacked survivors who reached islands or remained trapped nearby. Many were killed, captured, or abandoned during the chaotic retreat. The emperor's enormous fleet had crossed the sea but failed to conquer Kyushu. In Japan, the storm became remembered as a kamikaze, or divine wind. The name suggested that sacred forces had protected the islands from invasion. But calling the victory a miracle hides the human effort before the storm. Japan had spent years preparing its warriors and building coastal defenses. The stone wall blocked the easiest landing places around Hakata Bay. Samurai resistance forced the invaders to remain exposed aboard their ships. Night raids and supply problems weakened the expedition. Disease and poor coordination made the situation worse. The typhoon delivered the final catastrophe to a campaign already under pressure. Without it, the second invasion might have continued much longer. Yet the sea concentrated his army into a vulnerable floating target. On land, Mongol mobility usually allowed commanders to choose where they fought. Near Japan, weather and geography controlled choices that cavalry could not solve. The failed invasions revealed a limit within the Mongol system. The empire could move armies across continents more easily than across hostile seas. Naval warfare required skills that conquest alone could not instantly create. Kublai considered further campaigns, but another invasion never reached Japan. Costs, rebellions, southern campaigns, and practical difficulties consumed imperial attention. Japan survived, yet the victory created serious problems for the shogunate. Because Japan gained no conquered territory, there was little wealth to reward warriors. Disappointed samurai families placed growing pressure on the Kamakura government. The invasions strengthened a shared Japanese identity. However, their enormous cost weakened political stability. They also changed the reputation of the samurai within later historical memory. Warriors who resisted the Mongols became symbols of courage and national defense. They also remind us that individuals experienced the invasion through fear and ambition. Centuries later, the lost fleet remained beneath the waters near Kyushu. Archaeologists have recovered anchors, weapons, ceramics, and armor. They have also uncovered surviving fragments of Yuan ships. These discoveries connect the famous legend to physical evidence on the seafloor. They show an expedition filled with ordinary tools as well as weapons. Soldiers carried bowls, utensils, arrows, helmets, and personal objects into danger. Each artifact belonged to someone who expected to return from Japan. Instead, mud and seawater preserved pieces of Kublai Khan's failed ambition. The wrecks also reveal how many cultures were trapped inside the Yuan campaign. Mongol authority depended on Korean shipbuilders and former southern Song resources. The invasion was an imperial project assembled from conquered peoples. Its failure was therefore not simply Mongolia losing to Japan. It was a complex East Asian war involving several societies and competing loyalties. The popular version often gives all credit to the divine wind. The opposite version sometimes treats the storm as an unimportant myth. The truth stands between those two simple explanations. Japan survived because preparation kept the invaders from winning before disaster arrived. The storm mattered because the fleet remained exposed when nature finally struck. Kublai Khan built an army powerful enough to threaten nearly any kingdom. But he could not command the sea, the weather, or time itself. His lost fleet became a warning about the limits of overwhelming power. Numbers mean little when supplies fail and geography favors the defender. Technology means little when commanders cannot coordinate ships across dangerous water. Even a world empire can become helpless when trapped far from land. Japan's survival was neither pure miracle nor simple military superiority. It was the result of resistance, preparation, miscalculation, and extraordinary weather. That combination turned two failed invasions into one of history's greatest legends. Today, broken ships beneath the sea still carry the evidence. They remind us that empires often fall short where confidence becomes certainty. If you enjoyed this cinematic journey, subscribe for more stories of lost empires. Turn on notifications and tell us which invasion history should explore next.